Hello, welcome to Colorful Code. I'm Eric. Today, I would like to talk about the Microsoft Graph API and then how to use the Graph API. So firstly, what is the Microsoft Graph API? Microsoft has many services like mm, Excel, Word, SharePoint, Access, etc. Uh, Most of them work independently. But Microsoft provides us a very good way to access all the data inside the Microsoft 365 account. So why it is useful? Because the organization administrator might want to access all the data inside the SharePoint, which is a site which represents a site website for the internal organization, or even the organization administrator would like to access or monitor specific users' behavior, or looking into their PowerPoint, looking into their Excel to see if their account is hacked or any other suspicious behavior. In this case, Graph API comes into play, and then it is also very handy. So in this video, I would like to teach you how to access and how to use the GraphQL, not GraphQL. I always confused about this one. We are gonna use Microsoft Graph API to get access to the Microsoft 365 SharePoint website. So in the very simple way, we are using the Postman just to access it by simple HTTP command. Okay, um, so let's get into the main section. So I have created a kind of this document. I will put the link down to the description and you can have a look. So this is just a step-by-step tutorial. If you want to know more about the step, you can see I have the reference here. Um, to access the GraphQL API, it is very important to have the authenticate uh, behavior, because as I just mentioned that this is very critical if the one to operate this manipulate the system is not the real administrator or on behalf of administrator. So the authentication thing is very important, very critical in this case. So in this article, it has very detailed and a very clear instruction of how the Microsoft Graph API work and then how to use it. So as you can see here, it lists out the API endpoint, and then to access the endpoint, we will need to have access token in the very first step, and then with with this access token variable argument, we will be able to uh, use we will be able to send the HTTP request to this endpoint and then get the result which contain the information we want. And then following with the introduction of the Azure Active Directory service. This is also very important. I will guide you through one step by step to get the authentication and then all the credential information. And then this section is very critical to understand. There are two types of the application inside the Azure account, so that you will be able to use this application or the permission type to access the endpoint. This is a theory thing, but if you are interested in it, just have a look. And followed with this OS app. Okay. Yes, this is the one we just mentioned. I just mentioned we will need to create the app inside the Azure account like this, app registration, and then we need to create a new app to operate. It means that this application will act on behalf of us to get the data from the endpoint. Why not just use the user account? It is a very complicated story because of some kind of security issue or the system complexity issue. So Azure decided to use the application-based authentication instead of the user-based authentication. If you are wondering why, and you can check out this section. Okay, and then the next step is the configuring the application permission, and then I will guide you through in the real action later. And then we will be able to get access token. Then we are able to use this access token to actually query the information through this endpoint. Okay, let's get back to this document. Firstly, there are two types of access token that, as I mentioned, there is one is application, and another was the delegated uh, access token. So I'm not gonna use this one. I'm gonna use this one because I'm not gonna use the certain user's credential to access the endpoint. I'm gonna use the application without the certain user's password or username. And then so now let's get on to the Azure side to fetch these four informations. Okay, so before that, you need to have the Microsoft account, the 365 account or developer account here, and then just log in to your account, and then you will be able to see this dashboard. And then firstly, I'm gonna use the Manage Azure Active Directory. Once you get into that, you will be able to see the overview of our tenant, and then it shows that the tenant ID and then what is our domain, something like that. So it's mentioned that we need to firstly create a new application inside the application app registrations. Okay, and then click the new registration name. We just name it like SharePoint. What about Graph API? Like this. Probably it's not the best name, but it will work. And then who can use this application or access this API? So we will use the okay. I think this good. And redirect URI. Firstly, we don't need that. Register. Okay, cool. And then you can see I have a new application. And then next, we will need to register the information. Now we have the tenant. We have this. This is the application name, and this is the application client ID, and we will need to create our client secret. So in this case, we are gonna add a new client secret. So we say the name is Graph API, and then we just leave everything as default. And then here we got the secret ID here, but the actual value is here, not here. Don't copy the round number or round data. Okay, and we have the tenant ID, and we are gonna use Postman to do all the operation. So now we can open our Postman application and create a new collection. So this we call that graph. API, create, and then firstly we will add our variable here. First variable, we are gonna name it client ID, right? Oops, no, it's client secret. Okay, very annoying. Okay, client secret, and we are gonna have client ID as well, and we are going to have tenant ID, tenant ID, and the tenant name. And tenant name is very simple. Tenant name is the one here, 51TVNN, 1TVNN. Okay, and tenant ID is the one I will show you later. And client ID, we can see it from the previous page, on the top page of the application here, application client ID here. So we copy that here. And then we have client ID, client secret, and now we don't have the tenant ID. So tenant ID is this one. Copy, paste. Okay, now we have most of our information, and we can post a get. We can post a HTTP request to this endpoint. We firstly update this variable, and then we can create we can add a new request. We probably call it get access token, and we simply put the endpoint here. Okay, so I believe everything almost done, but remember that we need to put the parameter inside the no, it's not get, it's post. Okay, and then we need to put the information. We just use form data, and we need to put the information inside the form data. Client ID is client ID. Client secret is client secret. Resource is the endpoint of the GraphQL. Not GraphQL again, it's Graph API. So I think everything is done. We can. Okay, we can send. Nice, and then we get the information here. So we copy the access token here. And then we will create a new variable for this collection called access token. Pass it in, update it. Okay, and then we go to the next step. We just skip this step because, as I mentioned, we are not going to use the certain user's username and password. So we can just simply use this access token to do everything we want. But before that, we need to create a Sharepoint site and set the permission. Okay. Now go to the our Sharepoint. Now I have already had two Sharepoint websites. for this demo, I'm gonna create a new website, SharePoint website. So we can just use the team site and then we call the name Graph API. So it will be the same as our application name. And okay, description we don't need, and then privacy setting. Well, okay. So I go next, and then we can add the member. So I just add myself as a member, and then add another one as member too, and finish. Okay. Now you will see our website has done. And to access this SharePoint site, we will need to do some setting. So the first setting is API permission. To let this API, to let this application to access all the created SharePoint website, we will need to add the permission. So add the Microsoft Graph permission, and then as I mentioned, there are two. We are going to use application permission because I don't want to use the certain user's password and username. And then to be specific, I'm going to access sites, right? So we just simply click everything to let this application to access everything of the website, SharePoint website. Okay, I think pretty that's pretty what we want to do. And then we can start crop the data in the SharePoint. So now we need to add two more information in our collection, Graph API collection. And we probably add the site name, which is name should be Graph API, which that name we created. And then we will probably the list name we will anyway need that, but we can do it later. Okay, so that's what we need to do for now, and we can create a new request. This one would be get user. Okay, so we just use the user API endpoint to make sure that everything is working fine. So very easy, simple API endpoint, and we need to very importantly give the access token here. So this is access token. Yeah, that's it. I think it should be upper letter, but it's fine. Okay, and the header we are gonna set. Yeah, this one is already done, so we can send it. Okay, so we can probably check the Microsoft documentation about the user, and we just simply want to list the user. Okay, and it says the permission, and we are using application, and then it says user read all or reader user read write all, and or directory read all directory read write all will be needed. So we now only have user read, so I don't think it's sufficient, so we need to add some more permission. User okay, we just click user read all, this one, and user read write all, this one, and okay, add permission, and then we still need some more. Call the directory read all, and directory read write all. Add permissions. Okay, then again, these four are not yet granted to the MSFT, so we need to click this. And now I hope this can become working again. Let's try. Well, let's get a new authentication code, not this one. Okay, and then we get this new one, copy, and change the variable, this one, update, and try to send again. Okay, very cool. Now it's working, and you will be able to see the detail of the user. And the first one is this one, and then a lot of user comes out here. That's pretty nice. That's exactly what we want. And let's get back to the documentation. Now, the second one is that we want to get the Sharepoint all websites. So we will create a new one called, well, add a request. We call it get Sharepoint all sites. Pretty sufficient name. Okay, and then we copy this endpoint. Okay, now we do it again. This is very annoying propagation, not responsive at all. Okay, this shows up again. So we have experienced already, right? So we go check the documentation here, and we see now we want to access the SharePoint, right? It should be called sites and list. Okay, here. So we are going to get sites, and we are gonna get this one, I believe, SharePoint site within a tenant. Okay, we are gonna get this one, and we need to have sites read all and sites read write all. Let's go check if we have that. Site read all and site read all and sites read write all. Now we have it. Okay, so we check it again. We get a new access token. Okay, and then we go check it, and then we need to set the authentication as this one, and then send it again. Okay, and now we get all the information here. So we have all the site information inside our tenant. So see if we can find out which one is the one we just created. Simply by search the Grab API. Yeah, you can see it here. Name is Grab API, and then display name is Grab API. Okay, now it is working. Now the next one, let's go back to our documentation. This one. So the next one is get SharePoint certain site. Certain site will be like this. We copy this and then get into the Postman again, and then we create a new one, new request, and we call that get SharePoint certain site. Okay, and very importantly, we need to set the old sphere token and pass out the send, actually the send endpoint, and then pass the get parameter, search, and remember our sign name, right? Sign name is the one that we just input inside our parameter. So send. So it shows no value. Okay. Make sure that our sign name is correct. Graph API should be correct. Well, let's check ID. So the ID is working. Do we need to, again, we tried it again. Search site name. I actually not really sure how does the search working, but we can try some of that. We search this name. Yeah, it does show up. And we search this name. Well, it also shows up. And we search some other name. We search this name. It does not show up. So there must be some specific registration thing. But if we do something like we directly try to access it by ID. Oops, okay, here it shows up. So it means actually that we can access this uh, graph, this website through the API. And now this is what we do, and then we can also, this one is what we did, and then we want to get the list. Okay, so here we just input list. Okay, and then you can see here it lists out all the lists inside this site. And then let's go back to our site to see if we really have this list. Oops. This is document, share with us. Okay, this is a list. So we can, so it's default one, probably we don't have the access for this. So we can create a new list, shall we? And then we have new list, blank list. Well, we don't use blank, we use the we use the template. We use simply work progress tracker with this template. Great. Don't do any special customization. And now we have this one, new list. And then we can create a new item called happy item. Okay, and then we save it. Now happy item shows up. Okay, and we go here to check. We go here to check if this list shows up. Well, okay, here this is showing up. Then if we want to access this list, we can copy this ID and then add the slash, trading slash, and then pass it on the very end. Okay, and then we can see the detail of the list. And let's see if we have the happy list inside. Happy. Well, no. Oops, what happened? Okay, this is a list. So we need to add the item on the very end. Okay, and then you can see all the items inside the list, and then we can check if there is a happy. Well, not yet, because this is not actually inside the list object. This is customizable field. So actually, we will need to add something like extend equal to field. Okay, and let's see if we can see the field. The better way is just check out the documentation here and get list, get items, and then we can see the detail inside the get item. Here is expand, it's not extend. So let's go back to the here. Cool. So we add expand field. Send. I think okay. Now we have it. So happy item shows up here. So now we can access all the information inside the SharePoint, but you might already found out that it's super hassling, right? We've already feel tired even though we've just do the read operation. Imagine that if we want to do create, update, and delete option by this Postman HTTP request method, it's gonna be super hassling. So I'm gonna introduce a very handy tool, very handy NPM package called MS365, and then you will see this one, MS365 Graph API auth. By using this tool, you will be able to create an instance to do the CRUD inside the SharePoint site. I will guide you through how to do this, and then I will just make use of the example code here in the real action. Okay, so let's just get into the coding section. So we will turn on our terminal first, and then we can get into the desktop, and then we create a new project directory called Graph API, and then we can see into the Graph API, and then use the VS Code to open it, and we can turn this off. And now it is a very empty folder for our project. So to do the operation, we need to do some pre-action. The first one is we need to init this directory as an npm module. So we use npm init, and then you will be able to see the package.json file here. And then we are going to install some dependency by yarn add. Firstly, we will need to install this one, the very important one. Okay, and then secondly, we are gonna install another one called, because we are gonna make use of the TypeScript, but so we are gonna install yarn add types. We install this one as a developer develop dependency type node. The reason to install this one is that there is no built-in node type, so we need, if we write the type in the node condition and in the node environment, we will need to have the types definition for the node. So we will create a directory called src and then create the index.ts, and then we can simply just copy the simple code here, paste here, and then we need to change this one to ms this package. Then here we need these three information, right? And then I think, remember, we have the information inside our Postman variable, this collection variable, and we can copy this. First one is the client ID. We copy the client ID, paste in here, and then second one is the client secret. Copy this one and paste in here. And then third one is the tenant ID. Copy this one and paste it in here. Nice. And we are ready to go. So I will guide you through the one by one. So there are four, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 6 scenarios we will need to go through. So the first one is the get the SharePoint site inside the tenant. And the second one is the get the list inside the certain SharePoint site. And then the third one is to get the item inside the list. The fourth one is cross item inside the list, including create, update, and delete. So let's start from the very first one. We will disable all the things from second use case. Okay, so now we have all the credentials. Let me explain how why and how this code work. And now we need to get the access token. So this package provides us a very handy tool to get the access token just in one line of code. So this one is imported from this package, get access token, and it will return the old response. It could be a null type or the result type. So if it result type is does actually exist, and then we will go on to the next rest of the code. If not, it just return out. And then we are gonna use this access token to create the Graph API query instance. So this instance has many useful tools to let us do all the operation later. So this is the instance that we have initialized. Okay, so we have this instance. Then what should we do next? The first one is to get the SharePoint site, and then we are gonna make use of the get sites method inside the instance and then pass into the site name. So we will make the change of this site name. Remember, our site is called Graph API, and then I think we are done. So here we will print out the site name and site the display name. So let's try if it's working. ts not in src index.ts. Perfect. The name is the Graph API, and then display name is Graph API, exactly that we have already created. And then the second one is we are going to enable the second one. We will get the list inside the Graph API SharePoint. Nice. And then we are going to use the get list inside function inside query and pass in the site ID as well as the name of the list. So remember that we have created this site, the list named work progress tracker, right? So it will return the list type. Then we will print out the list. So this name and the list display name. So let's try. Okay, beautiful. Now we have the name of the list, and then we have the name display name of list. This is exactly right. And then the third one is we need to enable the third scenario. This scenario is used for getting the item in list. So remember that we have the happy item created by me just now. Now let's see if we can use this to get this item. And then we are gonna make use of the get item in list, pass in the site ID, the list ID, and we will print out the fields. We will get all the items fields and then print out the title inside print out the title of the item. Okay, let's try. Awesome. Now it is working. As you can see here, we have the happy item. It is exactly that we have. Then we are gonna go to next step, the fourth one. This one is creating the new item in list. So this one from before for scenario 4, we have been only done the read section, which is the get section. So now we actually get into the post section. We can create a new item in the list. We can update the new item in the list, and then we can delete the new item, not delete that item in the list. So this one we are gonna create one, and then what should we do is that we are gonna make use of the post create list item and pass in the site ID, list ID, and the new item fields. So we create the new item fields here. We want to have the item title is my new item created at this timestamp, and then description is created by blah blah blah. Okay, now let's try. Okay, let's see if this item already created. Refresh. Okay, beautiful. Now we have this exactly my new item created at this timestamp, and then description is the created by blah blah blah. So that is exactly right. And then what if we want to update this item, created item? As you can see here, what if we want to have update the note here? Once we create this one, and then the note section is field is empty, and then we want to update this note empty, what should we do? We can make use of the patch update list item. So we will need to input the site ID, list ID, item ID, and then a field. The field that we want to update. So in this case, we want to update the notes fields, and we want to update it to this updated by blah 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 test. Okay, so let's try if it is working. So in this case, it will create a new item with the empty nodes, and then it will update the nodes to this one. Let's see if it's working. Okay, refresh. Okay, you can see here there is a new one, and then here is updated by blah blah blah. That's exactly right. So that's it. And delete. Actually, I want to do the delete, but uh, the delete will not be working using application permission. You can only use the delegate permission to do so. If you are using the or the access token of the delegate permission, and then you can use this method. But if you are not, if you only use the updated application permission, this is all what we can do. Okay, so now you see how powerful it is, and then how it can do. We can operate the item inside the Sharepoint, meaning Sharepoint can act as a database. And then we can put the library inside our front end and integrate with the backend. And then to operate the backend, we don't need to create a whole new administrator site because Microsoft has already created that for me, which is the Sharepoint site. Is it awesome? So I think I would definitely use this tool with Microsoft SharePoint to create more interesting uh, application. If you are interested in this kind of application, please follow me, and then I'm gonna create some more application with SharePoint as a backend, and then front end, probably single page application, React.js, Next.js thing. So integrate with each other, create some kind of wonderful, interesting, exciting project. So if it helps you, please click like, thumbs up, and follow me. So I will see you in next video.